Hello and welcome to this session on observations of teaching and learning. Now, the reason we're doing this session is because recently we've just undergone our Ofsted inspection and we've got some key things that we want to bring from that, and we want to share best practice with everybody. So the first kind of important thing to discuss is the fact that we are dropping the way in which we grade our sessions. They are simply now going to be graded effective or ineffective, meaning we can demonstrate that every learner in the classroom has learned something, or that learning wasn't effective and it didn't reach the wider audience that it was meant to reach. So with that in mind, we wanted to kind of put together a presentation video for anybody who delivers teaching and learning to understand some of the indicators, as it were, to what would be seen as effective, and how that can be used in all examples of teaching and learning. Now, one of the things I'm not is a TV presenter, so I apologise about the quality of this video. However, it's more to be used as an aid, and me just to get the point across regarding to what we've been through recently as Ofsted. Okay, so let's look at some of the things that we've picked up on and lessons learned from our last two examples. So the first thing that was picked up on is about the learning environment and the habits. Now, this one's really difficult for you to prove because it's quite obvious when a class has been set up or staged. A class that has been running for a period of time will have certain behaviours and certain indicators, if you like, as it were. So a class that's been run over a period of time, you can naturally see that the learners come in. They would remove their jackets and coats, they would feel at ease, and the dialogue between each other seems natural and free-flowing. When I observed some of the classes, it just didn't feel like that. Some of them seemed really forced. It just didn't feel natural. The behaviours in the class hadn't been ironed out. Meaning, if a class has been established for a period of time, lateness and attendance would be addressed. You wouldn't normally have groups of people coming to and from a class if a class had been running for a long period of time. That behaviour would have been addressed in the first couple of sessions. Equally, about the politeness of the learner. So learners that have been well managed generally understand some of the working arrangements within a class, such as space for people to talk, opportunities for people to reflect. The ways in which views were challenged are obvious. So bear in mind that if you have an Ofsted coming up, you want to be able to demonstrate that the environment and the habits within that environment are appropriate for the depth and time that you're in the session. So looking at some of those, one is definitely around the manners. Now, one of the things that both of our Ofsted inspectors have said is you have some very polite learners. You can see that they're well mannered and that they're engaged. So spending some time with your learners discussing about behaviours is key to a good Ofsted, key to demonstrating that teaching and learning is effective and that you're managing the students in a really robust way. The atmosphere is the second thing that I want to pick up on. Does it feel like there's energy in the room, or does it just feel flat? So knowing your learners and knowing that class profile is really important for picking up energy. So what does that mean? Well, if you have learners where maybe English is a second language or challenging learners, you need to find methodologies and teaching methods that can pick up that energy and pick up some buzz and vibe. Because it doesn't matter how good you are as a teacher, if in your observation it just feels that you are dragging people through a classroom, there's absolutely no point. But if you can pick up some of the energy and some of the pace, then the environment feels like a learning environment, and that everyone wants to support and engage with each other. So it's really important that you get the atmosphere right. So that includes things like lighting and ventilation as well. One of the observations that I did, the teacher turned out the light to do the PowerPoint presentation. The room was quite warm, and by half an hour into it, even I wanted to switch off and my brain wanted to die. So it wasn't effective. However, if the PowerPoint were maybe available on PCs, or that whole session was delivered in a way where that PowerPoint wasn't even needed, it would have been far more inspiring, it would have been more captivating, people would have been more involved. So just bear that in mind when you're going through that. Now the second thing is planning. Planning for a session hasn't got to be a detailed plan. It's got to be evident that you have taken time to think about each learner and how you're going to do it. So what that means is there should be a class profile. We should be able to walk into your observation and say, okay, what's your mix? What's the ages? What's the skills? What's the ability? What's the ethnicity? Are there any differentiations within the stuff? And how are you going to do all of that? So that should already be pre-done after the first or second class. We shouldn't be midpoint and you still going, oh, I'm not really sure. Now, the other thing around the planning for this session is this might be evident through the assessment methods, the assessment tools, or the PowerPoints, or maybe some of the videos and activities that you're using. Remember, just because you plan for it doesn't mean you have to do it. It might be the fact that you've started that session and thought, you know what, that's not going very well at all. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the whole plan. It's not worked. Always have a plan B for your sessions as well. So if you have an activity in there and that activity is not going very well, try and line up a second one just in case that one hasn't achieved its outcome that you were hoping for. But what's really, really important in planning for that session is how are you going to test that learning has taken place? So, for example, the aim of this session might be to understand health and safety at work. How am I going to test that every learner has learned something? What is my assessment method going to be? Am I going to get them to do a quiz? Is it going to be a short answer session? Is it going to be role play or an activity? But how do I know that they know? That was the key to a good outcome of a session. Is it the case that we deliver a little bit, we stop, we reflect, and then we move forward? So each aim, we're doing bite size. The other thing that was picked up on was about vocabulary. Now this was really important. If you are teaching classes at level 2, the vocabulary used should be at functional skills level 1. If at level 3, it should then be at level 2 functional skills. But remember, we have the stretch and challenge as well. So we should be using keywords that pushes learners beyond their boundaries. So think about some keywords in that session that you know you could push people on. Get people to explain, maybe have it as an activity to use their smartphones to find a definition. But it is down to you as the teacher to plan that you are stretching the learners on key vocabulary words and that those words are relevant to the context of the session. Okay. By doing that, you will have automatically met the functional skills requirements, so embedment of functional skills, just by using keywords. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about, which for most of us is a no-brainer, is around the use of equipment. Please make sure you know how to use the equipment that you are using in a classroom. There is nothing more embarrassing than during an observation of teaching and learning that you don't know how to use the PowerPoint or that you don't know how to use the computer in front of you. Remember, if you do a PowerPoint session, it should be in the slideshow version. We should be demonstrating it as the big screen, not with the slides going down the page. Remember about the colour, the text, the font, what it looks like. And remember, nobody wants death by PowerPoint. That's not why you've come to a teaching and learning session. Equally, make sure you're using a range of teaching styles. So if you have a bit of text, turn that into discussion. Try and get an activity to reflect that. Please don't just do slide after slide after slide, because that will not go down as effective. And if you do slide after slide after slide, you are only meeting the theoretical learner. So the activist learners in the room, which evidence would suggest are more so in vocational learning, they're going to be switched off and disengaged. So bear that in mind. Now, you've then got the use of the ICT equipment. So, in line with using ICT equipment, it's important that we can embed ICT into a classroom. The idea is that we are empowering our learners to be independent, more creative. So try and think about how we can encompass ICT. Even if you have it as research at the end of a session, here's a website, there's a link, here's an ebook. At least you're showing a stretch and challenge and an embedment of IT. Great. Now, let's move on to the learning habits. Now, again, learning habits are really important. First of all, are learning objectives set? So at the very beginning of any learning activity, what is the purpose of it? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Remember, learning needs to take place up to 40 minutes. Anything over 40 minutes, your learners are uncomfortable. You know, let's go back to when we were at school. There was nothing worse than listening to a teacher drone on for half an hour and us all sitting there really uncomfortable, feeling tired. Let's remember, after 40 minutes, we don't think, our brains stop, we've taken in what we can take in, and therefore, is it effective to carry on past 40 minutes? 10 minutes of listening to somebody to talk, and this video will demonstrate it, you start to think, oh, when's he going to stop? However, on this one, you can pause, get a cup of coffee, come back and watch, so no excuses. But just bear that in mind. If your session is long, how would you feel if you were the receiver of that information? Too much information in one go, it's not going to go in. Not enough information, and you're going to feel unstimulated and unchallenged. Therefore, your learning objectives are key to you planning that session. So if an Ofsted inspector came in, or you're having an observation teaching and learning, you could say, these were my sessions, this is what we're going to do here, and the way that we're going to assess this bit is by reflecting or doing these activities. Now, the sessions that I've seen, we had half an hour observations and an hour observation. And it was really tough for the teacher to demonstrate that teaching and learning had taken place in under half an hour. But then when the Ofsted inspector gave the rationale for it, it seemed to make perfect sense. We deliver a bit of teaching, we then summarise it and go back to it. We wouldn't go hours and hours and hours without testing. So, bear in mind, learning outcome, small aim, keep it nice and smart. We go, we teach, we reflect, we teach, we reflect, we teach and we reflect. And in that reflection, we need to make sure that every learner has participated, because if they do not, the teaching session is not effective. Now, the quality of work also will demonstrate whether or not the teaching is successful. So therefore, it's important that you keep samples of work throughout. Some of the qualifications we're now delivering, or sorry, some of the standards that we are now delivering, do not have on-programme qualifications, or may be tested by multiple choice. It doesn't stop us on a formative way, making sure that learning is successful and the learner has understood what it is we've asked them to do. So therefore, we should be keeping worksheets and work tasks and making sure that they're appropriate. And remember, when we mark that work, we need to be marking it in line with the Ofqual level descriptors, not just simply whether or not they have met the learning outcome. For example, a learner at level 3 may have given you an understanding, or more of an analysis, shall we say, of health and safety at work. They've written a wonderful paragraph, but actually the writing is more at level 1. The analysis was more of an understanding than an analysis. Therefore, they very well have met what health and safety is and demonstrated through their writing, but they haven't met the verb or the off-call descriptor. So it's really, really important that when you mark the work, you are not simply marking it against the award and body standards, but you are marking it against the off-qual level descriptors. Fine. Successful criteria. So basically, whenever you set a task, are they achieving it or are they not achieving it? And if they are achieving it, great. But if they're not achieving it, how are you coaching? What feedback are you giving? And the other way that you can do that in class is the peer reviews and getting people to support each other and reflect on what things have been said or not said. So, one of the things that I did in one of the sessions when I was observed was I recalled on previous learning. So I said to them, okay, so this week, let's look at, say for example, I think we were doing CPR or something, but the week before we'd covered infection control. One of my learners came in with some hand gel and said, oh look, I'm going to demonstrate how to wash my hands. So what was brilliant, the week before session clearly had impacted on the learner enough to move into the following session some behaviours. So that gave me, that gave the Ofsted inspector the ability to say that the session was effective because it had impacted on the learner so much so that they'd gone out and changed the behaviour because of it. So recalling on previous sessions is really, really important. So when you're delivering a subject matter, especially in a scheme of work, the ability to go back in time and say, right, do you remember in session 1 we did this? Do you remember in session 2 we did that? In session 3 we may have done this. You're going back testing that the previous knowledge hasn't been forgotten. And what that does straight away, that puts the Ofsted inspector's mind at complete and utter rest, because then they can say, this class has switched on. They can reflect on previous sessions, clearly demonstrating that they've been involved in previous learning and that previous learning was successful. So it's a really important skill. But what will also be useful is going forward in time. So okay, so we're doing this activity. Here we did that. But in a couple of sessions' time, we're going to look at that. So you might want to start looking ahead. So again, recalling on previous learning is a fantastic way of showing the success of you as a teacher and by getting them to reflect. Now, the one downside to that is if you turn around and you say to your class, who remembers hand washing? And they all sit there and you can hear a little cricket go, purr, because actually it would demonstrate that that session wasn't effective. So if you do that, make sure that you recall something that you know they're going to remember. Now, other habits within a class that should be seen as differentiation. So ensuring that you can work with the class and show how you're managing everyone and how you're pushing people and how you're supporting people with different abilities and needs. So for example, you will not have a class where there is no differentiation. You are going to have learners that are at different stages, and it's how you're recognising that. So if you have a learner whose English is a second language, have you paired them up with somebody to be able to drive that forward so they can keep up? Are you stretching and challenging people so that they're trying to make sure that they get the right information there? So just be wary of that. So other habits within a classroom which demonstrate effective teaching and learning are around collaboration, so working together. Now, What teachers tend to do in Ofsteds are they try new things that they've never tried before. And then it just blows up in your face and it looks really odd, because it's like, well, if you've been working with this group for such a long period of time, why did that session not work? What went wrong? And what that means is normally when we say to somebody, oh, I'm going to split you up in groups and I want you to break down. Now, if that's something you've always done, learners would know how to do that. They would normally go, oh, I'm going to work with here, here or here. But then when you have to start separating the groups and go, right, you're number 1, you're number 2, you're number 3, and learners are confused by that method, it shows that you're doing something you don't normally do. And then it just looks a bit odd. So successful collaboration shows that from the very beginning, you allow the class to work together and as a team. And it shows that you've managed that ability to allow people to talk and people to listen. And when we're observing that, it's obvious to see whether or not you've managed that task in the past. Because if you haven't, it just looks a bit odd. And I'm sure you've all seen that when you go to a training session and people go, oh, right, split up into groups, and you all just look at each other completely shell-shocked. So bear that in mind. Equally, when you do group work and you get people to feed back, if you do feedback and group work sessions, you normally find that people will go, yeah, no, I'll do this, I'll write, you speak. If you get to a situation and you're being observed and you're asking people to feed back and it just doesn't feel natural, again, the habits, the learning habits aren't going to be there. So it's really useful that if you are going to try new teaching methodologies in your class, that you've explained it to them and that they understand how you're going to do it. And one of the things that I would always suggest, if you are going to get people to stand up and do short presentations and to reflect, that you kind of encourage them to find out who that person is before they do it, because there's nothing worse when you go around the room, you say, right, okay, group 1, if you want to feed back, and then they're sitting there arguing with themselves, because that doesn't show effective habits. So, what else we'll consider learning habits? So other learning habits are around cross-curriculum themes. So we should be encouraging, and we should definitely be embedding functional skills, English, Maths and ICT. So wherever there's a natural opportunity to add that, we should be adding that. But only if it's natural, and only if it's relevant, and only if it's appropriate. We don't want you to be making things up just to fit it in. The other things that should be in there, and again, not all at the same time because it may not be necessary, are things around staying safe. So that means things such as equality and diversity, safeguarding, prevent, British values. You don't have to have it all on the same session, all at the same time. But in your bigger scheme of work, you will have definitely covered it. And again, if we go back to linking in learning, if a learner says something, maybe learners aren't listening to each other, you could say, look guys, in class, we've got things around British values. One of them is respect, the other is tolerance. You cross-arguing with each other doesn't show that. If a learner's late, that might be a great opportunity to sit the learner down, if you're going to let them into your class, and then talk about respect. And say, you know, if you wanted to do something and somebody was late, how would you feel? And get them to reflect on that. So again, there's natural opportunities to embed those wider sectors. But that's all down to your confidence as the subject leader. Remember, we have the hot topics each month that comes out, and at some point in your monthly teaching, that should be done. Now, what would look odd is if every teacher in the middle of the month all of a sudden decided to teach hot topics, because that's not actually what the curriculum matter is. But you should naturally be able to link those subject matters in. Now, the other cross-curriculum parts is around if you're teaching maybe the standards and you've got the skills, knowledge and behaviours, that you're linking the skills, knowledge and behaviours to the session that you have just taught. Equally, you may be able to link units forward or link units back. Now, the final thing around the learning habits is about making good progress. How are you tracking your learners' progress? What does the progress look like, and how are you going to demonstrate that to Ofsted? So we have the My Attendance registers, and in the My Attendance registers you can set up the assignments and the tasks that it is you're getting them to do, and at the end of that session you can click a button and it progresses everyone forward. But equally, when you do a segment of teaching and learning, can you demonstrate that progress is being made? So as a teacher, it's down to you to manage how progress is working, because it's important that you can do that. So we've done the environment, we've done the learners. Now let's look at the teachers' habits. Now this is the bit where it's obvious and very transparent whether or not a teacher is a qualified teacher or not. And that's because our habits will indicate the experience and the skills that's required for you to teach a successful teaching session. And the problem that you have is, and this isn't any negative comment to anybody that's not done teacher training, but this is a reason why you should do teacher training. If we've done our stage 1 teacher training, so we're talking about PETALS or the Awards in Education training or the 7307 or just Train the Trainer, they're short micro sessions that teach you how to manage maybe a short session. When we do the certificate in education or the diploma in education or even advanced teacher status, it teaches us the habits and the behaviours as a teacher. It teaches us about the professionalisms. We go into areas of ethics and principles. So it's a far more in-depth set of habits and behaviours that's being taught than what you would receive in the shorter courses. So therefore, it's dead easy for an Ofsted inspector, and including myself, that when we watch a presentation, you can just feel that the teacher has or hasn't got the experience or the knowledge behind them. And that's not a bad thing. The ability to reflect on that and the ability to move yourself forward using maybe reflective practice models, ongoing CPD, is really important. And not taking things personally is a huge skill set, but learning from them. So let's start at the top. So the first one is about you as a teacher maintaining your subject knowledge matter. Now, this can always be quite a tricky area. Is it the fact that you're in an industry where it is competency based? So for example, IT, nursing. They're jobs that you have to be on the floor practicing and doing all the time. How are you going back to sector to understand that? The second thing is around professional recognition. Are you a member of any institutes? Do you have regular updates? Are you getting manuals, CPDs? So for example, if you are a teacher and you are teaching in an FE environment, whether that's work-based learning or in a college, do you have professional membership? Are you involved with SET, the Society for Education and Training? Because if not, do you not feel that you owe it to yourself and to your learners that you do become a member and keep yourself up to date with immersing changes, technologies, policies and procedures? It is such a fast, rapid changing environment that it would be impossible for you to keep up to date with everything. The idea of professional membership is it streamlines the information that you need and provides you the up-to-date information to remain on top of your game. And you owe that to the people that you are teaching to have some kind of membership and support network behind you, because it is such a difficult, challenging times and a hard environment. And with all the changes going on, knowing that you have that support behind you just keeps you at the cutting edge. So I would absolutely advocate, as a teacher, you would sign up to the Society of Education Training. But that's just on the teaching side. What about your sector side? So think about how in half terms or term times am I going to go back to sector and keep up to date with some of the changes? Because it just doesn't cut it anymore saying I'm going to do CPD online, I'm just going to do a few courses. It's not enough. You must know what is going on in your practice in a contemporary manner, so up-to-date, hands-on experience. Now, the other thing that they're looking for is that you use targeted closed questions. So in other words, you target people now. So we used to call it the pause and pounce, but now it's targeted closed questions. So do you agree with that? What's your thought on that? Are you sure about that? Do you agree with that opinion on that? So when somebody asks the questions, you can just simply go in and get the yes or no answer, but they're targeted. Especially to the learners that maybe aren't engaged in the class, it's a great way of saying to them, you know, don't switch off. I'm watching you. You know that you should be contributing or participating, but you're not. And then we have the open questions. So if I want to test that learning has taken place, I can then say, okay, so what's your understanding on that theory? How would you apply that model? What would you do in that situation? And that you move around the room in a systematical manner, making sure that everyone has participated. The other thing around the teacher's habits are around modelling. So when we talk about modelling, are you set up for class 15 minutes before you go into your session? Do you have all the right resources? Are you giving feedback at an appropriate manner, time and pace? Are you being positive? Are you using the appropriate language? Are you somebody that's standing up and being inspiring and able people to look at you as a positive role model? Again, well organised teachers understand that part of their role is to be inspirational and for learners to learn from them. If you're not well organised, if you're not well prepared, if you're not well planned, then learners are going to disengage and go, well, if you're late, I'm late. What are you going to do? So bear in mind that we cause some of the problems in class. Equally, around tolerance. So if you allow poor behaviour in the class, then people are just going to look at that and accept it. As a teacher, it's your responsibility to challenge and role model best practice. Now, some of the ways that we can do that as well is by recording some of our sessions and then watching them back. So, for example, do I have any annoying habits? Do I do things that may distract other people? Am I dressed appropriately? So, is my personal hygiene appropriate for the class? Because I can't expect my learners to look nice and smell nice if I don't look nice and smell nice, for example. So personal hygiene is really important. Now, just think from an observation and teaching point, it's dead easy to spot a teacher that's not well groomed. Okay, so moving on. Teachers work with focus. So when we give tasks, we keep them on track. So for example, if I say we're going to do a 10-minute breakaway activity, that I have a clock in the room that is 10 minutes, because again, we're teaching that timekeeping is an important factor. We go back to why we did the session, that group activity. So guys, the purpose of this task was, once we've done the task, we go back to the task. So after completing that, what do we feel we got from it? Demonstrating, teaching, learning. Okay. So the use of speaking and listening. In all of your sessions, we should be planning an opportunity for speaking and listening. Now, the listening skills as a teacher is absolutely crucial and absolutely crucial, and it is a skill for you to do. So when a learner comments, paraphrasing back what they've just said to you is really important, because it shows that you've understood what it is that they've said to you. So for example, a learner may be talking about an experience that they've had, and you'll be able to then say, okay, so let me understand what you've just said to me. So what you've just said to me is, so that repeating back, that reflective conversation back to the learner shows that you've understood what they've said and starts to role model some of the speaking and listening skills that they're going to need for their functional skills. if you become dismissive in class, if you don't allow an opportunity for natural conversation and progression, how are you going to expect your learners to do that for their speaking and listening and their functional skills? So you should role model all of the active listening skills in your classroom. So, a range of learning styles. We all know that every learner has different learning styles, the VARK. Therefore, it makes absolutely no sense when a teacher delivers a theoretical session only, because you have then excluded a third of the group. So bear in mind that the recipe for a great outcome is the theory and the practice, and the two linking together. We know that when we see, do and hear, and we bring that learning together, that learning becomes successful. There is absolutely nothing worse than sitting in a session and just hearing somebody talk at you without trying to link it back to things and trying to challenge the brain to think widely. Just reading from a PowerPoint is not teaching, and actually it used to frustrate me whenever I was a student, because I just thought, I could have read this, you're not telling me anything I can't read. So it's important that we use that range, but also that you use it with the appropriate people. So in your profiling, that's relevant. In the differentiation, the levels, that's relevant. And as we go up the off-call indicators, we expect the challenges to become harder. So that's fine. There's an opportunity there to become more theoretical, but not then at level 2 standards, because again, that it's just not engaging. It's not meeting their needs. So it's important that you understand that. So the session should be well paced. Now, with the well-paced session, it's all about making sure that our learning aims at the beginning of the planning aren't too big, that we've got them at the right size for the right group, and that we have natural progression points to reflect back, but also that we have some natural breaks. Now, we all know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and if we don't, we should know them. And we all know that everybody needs encouragement, food, warmth and love. So in our sessions, let's give the encouragement, let's give the support, and then let's give them an opportunity to get food and fluid and breaks and hygiene breaks. By after 40 minutes, let's stop for 10 minutes, go to the bathroom to come back. Because actually, nobody wants people up and down, up and down, up and down, in and out of classrooms using the toilets. We should be able to say to our learners, look, 40 minutes is not a long period of time. I want you to all be here and, you know, use the bathrooms beforehand, but you don't need to be going for a bathroom break in a 40-minute session. It's a real controversial subject matter, but as far as I'm concerned, and my values and beliefs around teaching and learning, is a learner has a habit as well, and that's to go, I need to be responsible, I need to be prepared for this session, I need to turn up, I need to sit down, and I need to be engaged. It is simply disruptive for a learner to be up and going to the bathroom every 5-10 minutes, and completely unnecessary. Now, if the learner knows that you have short breaks, then they can go. Now, in some places of work, they wouldn't be allowed to get up and go to the bathroom every 5-10 minutes. So by allowing those behaviours, we're not showing that we're managing the class, and it just becomes disruptive. We then can't demonstrate that effective teaching and learning has taken place. Now, obviously, if learners have access to assessments or reasonable adjustments because maybe they have bladder issues, then that's fine. But they would have been understood up front. But equally, learners that are on there using their phones and other things like that, they should be able to enter a teaching session that's well planned and well paced without having to have the disruptions around that session. So bear that in mind. Now finally, the other habits that we're going to look at are really the habits of the learner. So going back to some of those, which is just about how you're going to maximise their involvement. So think about when you're planning a session, could I have got them to have done that? Could I have got them to have been more independent? And I used to love the personal learning thinking skills in the old apprenticeship frameworks, and I'm kind of sad in some ways they're not there anymore, because I kind of felt that they had a really strong place. They kind of set some of the values and behaviours that we expected them to be: promoting independence, self-managing, being an independent inquirer. Actually, that's what we're after. We're after them becoming self-sufficient. So bear in mind other ways that we can do that. Now, one of the things that you have to understand within your session are the ages. So if a learner is under the age of 18, remember that they're going to have parent and guardian responsibilities. So some of the sessions that you're going to do may involve wider understandings of parent consent and issues around that. Equally, parents may want to know about progression. They may want to know how that young person is progressing through the course. So again, making sure that your younger person is aware that there's that link between you and the parent. It might be the fact that you can help the parent manage some of the younger person's workload. Learning can be quite a stressful time for a younger person, and if you are working with the under 18 bracket, their behaviours and things, we can talk about family and lifestyles, etc. as well, and bringing those into the mix. So what we're saying now is we're not going to be grading you anymore. We're not going to be saying this is a behaviour of an outstanding session and this is a behaviour of a poor session. What we're saying is we're looking for habits in learning. We're looking for habits that are natural habits that demonstrate learning is taking place. We're looking for habits that show that you are an effective teacher and that effective learning is taking place. It's not subjective, it's not made up, it's quite clear. Can I demonstrate the learner has learned something? If we can, then the session was successful. If we can't, then the learning was not successful. We do have a set of indicators, of course we do, which will be circulated with this video. But I don't want us to focus on all of those as tick box exercises like we did last time, because those tick box exercises stifled us, they stopped us being creative. What we're now hoping is by creating a set of habits and indicators that allows us to perform in a more natural role will allow the teacher the creativity that the teacher should have under their professional title. It is not unreasonable to expect that the teacher can deliver a session which is naturally occurring, which it just evolves. It doesn't feel like it's being stifled by red tape and bureaucracy, but actually it is relevant to the learner, and that you can adapt the session to be more engaging and more inspiring to the person or the people that you're delivering it to. Just remember the underlying principles which we've discussed. Just think about, are the habits that I am doing, are they appropriate? Are the habits of my learner enough to demonstrate that they are under a learning environment, being supported correctly in line with the teacher? Because we know if they are, you'll fly through any OTLA or any Ofsted. When it's not, it is absolutely obvious that it is not. So let's just finally summarise this with how we're going to manage that situation. Not only are you going to have observations of teaching and learning via the QTLS team, so the Qualified Teacher Status team, because only somebody who holds a qualified teacher can carry out an observation of teaching and learning. Not only are you going to have those, we're going to expect you to do self-reflections. So we are going to want you to video a minimum of 8 sessions a year. And along those videos, which must be a minimum of 1 hour long, we're going to want you to write reflective accounts. So we're going to want you to identify learner habits that you saw, teaching habits that you saw, environmental habits that you saw, and then kind of come up with your own conclusions. So that's 8 self-reflective videos a year to demonstrate that you are self-reflecting after sessions, because ideally you should be doing it at the end of every session, not just 8 times a year. We're going to have peer reviews, so we're going to ask other teachers just to walk into your class and then monitor you, so you can have walk-ins. So you're going to have your OTLAs via the QTLS team, you're going to have self-reflections, and you're going to have peer reflections. Now, the final thing that we're looking to do are cross-party reflections. So we're going to be looking at our subcontractors, and we're going to be looking at other institutes for benchmarking. And we're going to ask them and invite them in, and we're going to support each other as well, because it's really important that we benchmark across the board. Now, the idea of this is that we have an opportunity to start looking at the behaviours and the habits that should be there and how they constitute best practice. And it's then about sharing that best practice and then bringing it back. Remember, your Ofsted inspector now marks in a way which looks at, can I demonstrate effective teaching and learning has taken place? The way in which they grade is by demonstrating the outcome for the learner. So, for example, if you put up your learner names at the beginning of the session, the Ofsted inspector will write something along the lines of, the teacher put up the learner names, this allowed the learner to understand what was being taught through that session. If you challenge learners and you pause and pounce on people, they'll say things such as, the teacher used open and closed techniques. This demonstrated the learner could repeat back what was discussed or what was taught, or tested their understanding. So everything you do, Ofsted will comment on how it has benefited the learner. And if you change your thought methodology to that process, it's going to be a lot more successful for you and for the learner. So I hope that you found this session useful. I apologise it's gone on for 45 minutes, but again, you can't rush perfect. You've got the observation indicators that I'm going to create alongside this video, and I just want you to just start to reflect and think about the changes that's necessary. And if you're not sure about those changes, come and find somebody from the teacher department and discuss how it is you can adapt them. Anyway, thanks for watching and good luck.